Welcome to Tiffdoesloans podcast. So today I have Paul H. Graham. How are you?
Well, how about yourself?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me. Paul is just serial entrepreneur. He's an author, investor, just all across the board, helping people all over wealth management. We'll go into that in a little bit, but just wanted to thank you so much for coming. And why don't you just start to kind of, open up your journey, how you, got into entrepreneurship, or, where that all kind of started for you, and, which kind of led you into investments.
Yeah, you bet. So I was very fortunate that my mom, poured into me at a young age. And so I always wanted to invent things or create things. And I even had this little booklet of different inventions. And I saw an advertisement to go to a invention kind of like business place. They help you get patents, basically. And I was like 8 years old and ultimately asked, hey, like, what does it take to get a patent? They said, hey, it takes, 40 grand or so. And so I turned to my mom and said, hey, we need 40 grand to make this happen, right? So I've always been someone who's, tried these different just avenues or things, what have you, right? I've been residential painting business. I've had a software company that, co-founded and fundraised with. And then also, have most recently been in kind of the capital market space. So think of, raising funds for like oil and gas. I have a number of properties myself. And so it's just been this journey of like investing and entrepreneurship. Like in some ways they're kind of the same. Like as an investor, you go into the thought of like, oh, hey, I'm going to buy this building. And there's a little bit more surety with investing than necessarily entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is completely unknown. So needless to say, I've had a number of different, business endeavors, number of different investments. And then, today it's kind of a, wealth management, business growth combo, really helping people increase their business and their wealth growth, learning kind of from the mindsets and the tactics of 8-figure entrepreneurs to really make that path easier to grow in both of those aspects. So
I love that. And I think they just go hand in hand. Like when you're an entrepreneur, like you just have to constantly be coaching like your mindset and like learning and, finding those avenues to keep, because I just think of it like it's never going to be like a straight path, like constantly have to be kind of like leveling up a bit. So, but that's so awesome that you provide that for, kind of pay it forward and are helping, it's mostly men, right? But like helping other entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I mean, it is mostly men, but that's simply just from the demographic of typical business owners, right? And so it's, fascinating to see what people can do. But the other big thing that I find of working with entrepreneurs and just being an entrepreneur myself ultimately is being in the right lane. And so oftentimes we might be the business owner, but we should actually be more of the operator. And so going into the right lane based on our strengths and our capabilities, not just our desires. We may want to go play in the fluffy dandelion fields, if you will, but that's not something that produces business results. Very clear line again with investing. You have the money, you find the money, you put it in, and like kind of lime in the coconut. Entrepreneurs is not the case, right? Like I could talk to 100 people and say, hey, do you want this? And they could say no, and I could get no results of sorts, right? Then I could talk to someone on the plane and then instantly they're like, oh, I'll take $1 million of what you got, right? And so there's definitely a mindset shift in the sense of abundance, recognizing the thoughts you have, shifting those thoughts, as well as just holding those thoughts captive and not allowing them to become moods or attitudes. Because those things can really then, stay on you. The idea of, can you do it or can you not do it, right? Or both true. It's just more of what you constantly tell yourself, both with the story, as well as like what you find in terms of reinforcement, because you could have total product market fit. You could have like all these things. You might know the person who could really radically transform your problem, but it's recognizing that, coming in with humility, capturing those thoughts, and really progressing forward. that are really going to give the belief in the, ultimate idea, as well as just yourself as well. Because that's, I would say, also the battle, right? It's not just, the idea. It's also like, are you the one to, carry kind of the torch through these different fashions? And oftentimes as an entrepreneur, the answer is yes. Although there are certain inflection points within a company, and again, with your strengths, that really just by recognizing you should really lay down and surrender and say, hey, like, here's our CEO exit plan. Once it reaches this level, or once we kind of have these sort of things happen, I'm just not best suited to take it from 5 to 50 employees, if you will, just as an example.
Yeah.
And so that's, just one piece of how to radically transform and, grow a company from, early 7 figures to kind of that 8 figure, and really that 8 figure mindset, because it's, been done before and can be done. But oftentimes, we want to do it ourselves initially, and then we get a group of people, and then we, kind of get it to that 7 mark. But really, to get that 8 mark, I mean, you just need a radically transformational system in place, and knowing the right ways to do business, not just knowing the right way how to do it. The idea of like being the best as opposed to your best. Now, that's an opportunity for growth as well, right? You could potentially become the best from your initial best because of limiting beliefs or, experience or things like that. Again, it also could just be like you're not best suited in that lane, and you in a completely different lane could radically, exponentially transform the, outcome of the company in a positively impacted way.
100%. But again, it's hard, like you're saying, for like that entrepreneur, that person would have to be aware that like, hey,
Sure.
I'm going to be best in this area. But a lot of times, I have read a lot, and like I'm an entrepreneur myself, so it's like, but you see, there's one book that I love that really pinpoints it. Like I think it's Dan Martell, but it's basically like, he calls them hand grenades, but like self-sabotage a little bit. Like a lot of us, when we try to get to that 7 or 8 figure, like when you're trying to jump levels, it's like, not that you can't, but that you're not hiring anybody else to, or even if you have people in place, you're not letting them do the work. You're like still kind of dabbling in it, I guess. Still kind of keeping that mindset of trying to like just build it all alone, when I like how you said that, like sometimes we need to stay in our own lane. But again, like I feel like that's the building of entrepreneurship. Like you have to become the person.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not to say you're only.
You have to build into this person that's like humbled, or that could be like, fine, I'm like, this is my vision. Because we're basically, every time when you add somebody to your team, it's like you're handing them over a piece of your vision, your dreams, I feel like. So
yeah, I mean, and so
they see it.
It's not to say like you're so in your lane that you're not, doing anything else, right? It's just more, again, of what are your main, activities, and recognizing it. So control typically comes up, delegation, as well as elevation, right? So it's not just, hey, do this. It's, hey, this is our mission and vision. How would you go about doing this, right? Hiring the right talent, empowering them, incentivizing them, such that when they do something, it's exponentially better than you could have imagined or you could have dictated, as well as, the product that they have. You're also investing into humans. So there's also, and I talk about this in the future book I'm writing in The Investor's Guide to Joy, but the idea of, you have investable capital, and then you have relationship capital, and then you also have, spiritual capital. But ultimately, the idea around, what are you, believing, who, the, book Who Not How, right? So like, who has done it before, as well as who can help me do it, or who can do it for me, right? Those types of things. And as well as you look at, letting go of control and things like that. Again, it's the idea of, delegation and elevation. Dan Martell talks about, buy back your time.
Yes,
So
that was the book.
Okay, yeah. So that's another piece that really comes into mind. This is also something I talk about, in the book, where essentially oftentimes as investors, specifically like real estate investors, if you will, we often tend to take every single dollar imaginable and we would totally negotiate the dollar donut to 70 cents just because we could, or at least commercial brokers do that. I say that because I used to be a commercial real estate broker. And just, it was wild how some of the conversations that, I had, or experiences I had. But it's the idea of, with the dollars that you have, putting it everything into real estate, and recognizing that there's, more to it. And so that being said, on, being more prepared, and using investable capital that you've allocated for it, as opposed to all the dollars that you have, right? Meaning to say, or said another way, if we use all the dollars we have and then invest in something that doesn't go well, or we have cash flow constraints or things like that. I don't know about yourself, but I know a handful of people, I mean, including myself, in years or in times or in seasons where I just didn't have enough cash flow to survive. And because of that, I wasn't able to, thrive. So it's the idea of, like, instead of throwing everything at the investment, also consider, again, elevating and delegating, and the idea of having a, virtual assistant or a personal assistant, if you will, maybe for your personal stuff, right? That's one way of, going about and investing, right? Beyond just, real estate, or maybe it's oil and gas or debt funds or venture capital that I've, also done. But it's the idea of investing in, like, other people, because that person could potentially help create this little side business that you have that brings the cash flow that then allows you to invest in more real estate, right? So, meaning to say, there's multiple ways to go about, investment. And again, traditionally, from being a commercial real estate broker, from having my own, portfolio, for talking to investors, as well as business owners. Business owners are very much like, no, this is my business. Everything's going in the business. And it's the idea of, like, at what cost? Like, are you putting all the chips in the center, or are you putting all the right chips in the center? And being prepared to have those, again, conversations, mindset, perspective, beyond just the traditional all or nothing, or other nuances that you could have. And one other thing that came to mind earlier that you shared is just the one thing I've progressed with is the definition of going from me investments, right? Just me, hey, I don't want anyone on the cap table, it's mine, kind of stuff, right? Kind of like Finding Nemo, those seagulls. Then moving to more of a we, of, like, how could we accomplish this, right? How could, we, and who is that we? Who are those people that are part of that we, right? Partnerships is a very beautiful, also incredibly challenging thing. And focusing more, again, on the humans than the deals. I've seen too many people, as a slight tangent, like, just get into, a JV deal with people who could fund the deal, as opposed to being in the deal with the right people, and being with the right people who possibly have a deal type thing, right? And then last thing is the idea of he. So it's kind of from a faith perspective of sorts, but just this idea of, like, what could be, something that could be maybe a good investment that could be with other people, but could benefit beyond just the, say, property itself, either from, like, an eternity standpoint, but take faith out of it. Also a community standpoint, right? So the idea of potentially buying something and, not renovating every room and kicking everyone out, right? But really building a community around the people who actually live there, of which, increases retention between, tenants, and creates, a different sort of environment or experience than otherwise would be if it's just focused on the transaction. So that's also, I talk about this in the book too, but, like, about financial heart posture and things like that. But again, those steps of going from me to we to he, if you will, that also extremely changed of what I invested and how I invested. Because otherwise, if I didn't, I would just continue to be that individual who's just so focused on the dollars and cents and the portfolio and how many doors do I have and all that stuff. But so many things opened up when I started to bring the right people into investments, and have it be for the right reasons, not just for more money. So,
yeah. So just kind of like chasing the money versus now when you take a look at a deal, it's like, how is this going to benefit, like, the community, the people around, like, who, just more of a scenario rather than just looking at the numbers. Because there's definitely going to be a lot of investors out there that are like, they don't need to know anything about anything. They're just going to look at those numbers. They don't even need to see the property or, know anything about it. They're just going to look at the numbers and they're going to decide the deal by there. But again, when you do things like that, you're taking out any emotional standpoint. Like, they don't know how many people are going to have to, be kicked out, or, what's what it's going to take for them to get that deal. So like what you're saying is that you're definitely going to bring a little more, I guess, more emotion, more thought into more of your leading with faith.
Sure. Yeah.
And
So it's a combination
more
thing.
of a
So
purpose. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to break it down very tactically, it's to say like you have your financial heart, right? You have
Yep.
your egotistical emotions and you have your logical mind. If I only use my logical mind, I would constantly find data to basically, support and validate this idea that I should buy this property, and it would be affirmed by my egotistical emotions. Why? Because I'm intelligent. Me personally, my highest skill is being analytical. Therefore, I don't want to, ruin that own ego of my own self, right? Like the death of ego is basically surrendering yourself to a greater cause or, community. Again, the idea of like he type investments. But the other piece is like your financial heart. So why that matters in the sense of investing is this. Ultimately, if you went and bought, say, a car, for example, and you paid it debt free, and then you go around to people telling that you bought this new car and you don't have any debt on it, and you're basically bragging about it, like your heart posture is essentially saying like you're boasting. And so whether you paid for the car all on or you financed it or this and that, you're again bragging, right? Your heart posture is changed on the affirmation of other people of how intelligent and wonderful and credible that you are. And so the why that's important is one, because of like who you are, right? Not just what you have, but it's
Yes.
also the idea of like who then you're surrounded yourself with and who wants to be surrounded by you, right? Because again, great partnerships mean they're great people, right? But then the other piece is that I've looked at deals or thought about investing, and it's just like it's just not worth it. Oh, sure, we could, triple our money with this between the da 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 and da da da. Okay, great. Like, what else, right? And so that's also thinking about in the alternative space. I've also come into contact with like faith-driven type investments as well as impact-driven type investments as well. Now, granted that these are more private placements that are for kind of accredited investors, typically $50,000 minimum in terms of investments, similar to syndications, except their fund structure. And so again, there's just this idea of like there's things beyond just the dollars and cents. There's also again, community impact or eternity impact. Maybe there's something like regional impact. Like I don't know. There's a number of different
Yeah.
things. I've even found just to share a personal story. I partnered basically with my parents to buy a short-term rental in 2021 in Canyon Lake, Texas, and I saw my parents smile more in the past 4 years than I have in my entire life. And that's simply because like we did this together as a family. Now they weren't required to, answer my phone calls and questions about, hey, should we get this couch or that couch or things like that. But they were invited along the way and they felt part of it. And they were very excited and had this thing called joy throughout it. Part of the formation, of the brand, the Investor's Guide to Joy, but not, the full story. And so again, it's just this idea of like, what's your financial heart within the investment? Is it to have a bunch more money to then brag to other people that really don't care about you, other than just like what you have, right? Instead, it should be more focused on like who you are and who are you becoming. And then through that process, again, with relationship capital, maybe spiritual community capital and influence, why this is so important is that I've personally had equity deals or opportunities for investments that, hey, we'd love to give you 20% of, equity in this piece, right? Or, hey, we'll give you, a 10%, under market valuation, or, we'll waive the appraisal, or just like whatever these sort of nuanced things, because people want to be around people that they like and they want to see succeed. And it wasn't a hard nose, hard fast, these are the deal terms. Oh, I negotiated them. Oh, I showed them sort of thing, right? That's again a sense of like the ego analytical, type mind. And I just say that all to say like that's just my experience and story from like when I was a commercial real estate broker
Yeah.
to today, of just being that hungry shark to just like pounding on the desk, flip a table, not really, but like kind of to be like, no, this is what we want or what we need. Really changes again what investments you look at, how you analyze them, if you even do them, and if you do them, who you're doing them with, as well as what are you doing it all for, right? A lot of things that have really transpired again in my life, and enjoy talking about for a different perspective through the traditional buy 50 houses or buy, this many doors or whatever it might be, become financially free. It's more the idea of like, become a person of joy. And regardless of what you have, like you have joy in all seasons, right? Like
Yep.
that's what I believe we truly want to do. Real estate's fun, except for the last couple days before closing, because that's always stressful for me.
Yes.
I
I think
hate,
that's stressful for everybody. Just a process. It's like
yeah,
once you get in there, then it's like, okay. Well, because everything's on a deadline and anything can pop up. You know what I mean? And there's like so many different
yeah. I'm
sides.
trying to like actually live my life, and then the mortgage broker and the agents like kind of
And then
dragging
you're
their feet.
literally out. And we're like, hey, we need these 17 documents. like,
Yeah.
like back. Oh, by the way, we need them in the next 45 minutes or it's postponed. Like something ridiculous. I get it. I'm that person that calls you.
Yeah, and
Like
I have it.
ruins your day. That's
I
me.
mean, I have it blocked in my schedule. It's fascinating how I mean, the idea that comes up of just like how we go about through that process too. Like I've just anytime I've purchased, real estate, it's just been a stressful, difficult process. And transparently, it's been because I've done it for money, right? And
Mhm.
so it's like, well, shoot, am I going to lose the money? Is the thing the money? Blah, blah, blah. And so I'm just like constantly worried. My sleep score with my Whoop is just off, like all these factors. And so again, I've just found as I've made this different switch or these switches that I just, recently shared, that then also changed my worry or concern because I'm not concerned about money, right? I'm
Yeah.
more of, again, who I am and what I'm doing as well as like who I'm becoming. But, not what I have or don't have. If I lose the deal, so be it. Sure, it might stink, but that doesn't define me. That's not my identity is, through those things. Again, just that would radically transform all those things in terms of how, the reason I would invest in something, which is beyond a traditional Excel spreadsheet. Here's the best market. Here's the best, strategy type stuff. Again, why I love talking about it because it's a yes and you should do those things. And I'm very passionate about the analytics behind it. But that's also textbook kind of stuff, and most of the time is boring to people for Excel spreadsheets. So
Well, I like the whole other part of it or the
sure,
where
yeah,
you're choosing them. Yeah. Like I've been on a spiritual journey, so I get
yeah,
it. I love it. I try to also ground myself in like not the result. Like
for
now
sure,
I've been grounding myself more in the efforts and and it really does keep me grounded
yeah,
in just my everyday efforts and rather than placing everything. That's where I've kind of been lately, placing not rather than placing everything like in a result. So for you
uh-huh,
to be like, to get this deal closed, to like find this property, to and we put all these things, like I have to close X amount of deals, I have to do all these things. And it's just when you're chasing that result, it's just it really takes it out of you. Like
yep,
you're not in the present. Like you're missing the joy. If you're stuck, and that's one of the things, if you're stuck like in the result or in the money or chasing this certain thing, it's like that's when that joy starts to leave you.
yeah, because you're
I feel
disappointed with the plan, right? To your
yeah.
point, it's being
Well,
present.
because you're not getting there. And a lot of times it's just because the result or it's a process. Just like, when you're looking at your purchasing your real estate, it's
Mm,
like now it's like, okay, you get there, but now it's like this long process where now you're like stressed out the whole time.
sure,
And
yeah,
then you get it, and now it's like a whole other, now you have it, and now it's like, is it going to perform? Is it going to do this? Now it's like this. So I try to ground myself in the now more in the day to day, like trying to keep that joy, especially I am right in the middle of real estate and entrepreneurship and, my building stages, but it has helped me simultaneously. I've been doing my spiritual journey.
mm-hmm,
And some days it's like funny because, it's tough because if you listen to some of these, mentors or whoever, they're like, you just have to get it done. Like, don't ever quit. Like everything,
Sure.
you know, you just have to keep going. Don't ever stop. Like resilience, like, so when you're listening to all this stuff to build, but then it's like, I'm also doing my spiritual journey. So sometimes I'm like, is this a closed door? Like it makes me step back. Like, am I doing this for the right reasons? Like,
Mhm.
is it for the result? So it's
Yeah.
definitely been, it's been interesting, my mood fluctuation,
Sure.
like doing them simultaneously.
And
So I feel like I I feel like you're just more in it, right? So I feel like I'm
yeah,
still kind of like building.
sure.
I'm still building, but
Yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
the
I feel like
balance.
it's a huge part of it. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like it's where most of your time should actually be spent
Yeah. Well, it's also the
in
idea of like
building inside.
it's coming from abundance, not from
Mm-hmm.
a sense of lack, right? And so
Yes.
it's not the difference of like, hey, I work hard equals success,
Yep.
because that's certainly that is an old like thought that I had, right?
Yes, and
But
it's
now
a joy killer,
for
because
sure.
you'll never get yeah.
Yeah. But the other thing that's also different, because sometimes I talk to people like, and they're like, oh, okay, so then I, just wait, or the right things will happen, or things like that, and they kind of like
Mhm.
sit on their hands and feet. And so it's
Yep.
more of like you have the ability. You are the type of person who could just radically, go run 5 miles, or go lift this, or go make 347 cold calls in one day, or whatever it might be, right? You have the capacity and ability to work super hard when it's appropriate, needed, required, and beneficial. But it's not from the sense of like, I need to do this such that this will then validate me, or give me my identity, or give me the things that will then, prove to others, where I'm at. Because that then is, again, this heart posture piece. And so it, in some ways, yeah, is a balance, but it's the idea of like being able to do hard stuff, and then knowing when to do the right hard things, um, with the right amount of like effort and intention, and also letting it go, and the idea of surrender, right? There's the, surrender prayer.
That was
And
hard
I
for me.
Yeah, so I've traditionally found that the most amazing, wonderful, incredible experiences in my life have happened unexpectedly, and they've happened through action. And so as we, record this podcast, right? Potentially someone reaches out to you and says, "Hey, I'd like to buy something." Someone reached out to me and said, "Hey, really love the conversation. Let's chat." Da, 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 da. Like all these different things happen. One thing, wouldn't really chat a lot about, and not that, we need to, but just a quick story on this is, how I was able to create a really great relationship with a lender, because the original lender I used just like didn't know their underwriting guidelines, et cetera, didn't respond to calls and texts and Facebook messages, just like dude couldn't get
Yeah.
it together, right? Had to do a quick close in the span of a week, was able to, talk to him, and, go through, do hard money kind of bridge loan. I was able to save the property, keep my earnest money sort of things, right? That then ended up allowing me to reinvest a little bit into the property, and then, refinance, and I got a cash out refi, which ultimately kind of saved me through a season where I was having, another property that was having cash flow issues, and in between, different jobs and things
Yeah.
like that. So, if I would have just done traditional financing, and that guy just initially would have done it candidly right the first time, I wouldn't necessarily have had the opportunity or the thought to, do a cash out refi to take, these additional points for, this or that, because it would just been a really good rate. And the rate spikes. So it's just like, dang, like it would have been so much nicer if it was done initially, but it's just, it didn't happen that way. And even like a personal thing, like, I wrote a co-authored book with Kevin Harrington, who's like the original shark. I met him at a family office event, with his team, ended up having dinner with his team basically spontaneously. I got invited quasi to go, smoke cigars with them. Awesome. Just continued having this relationship. Again, the idea of relationship capital. And then because of that, was able to eventually get the opportunity to become one of the co-authors in, one of his books. It's, from startup to standout, entrepreneurial tales of success. And again, like how amazing is that? My parents even got to come to the, book signing. So again, kind of a full circle moment of my mom, investing in me,
That's so great.
of, being an innovator, and then being there for, that book signing event. So I could have not predicted that, right? Even me recently moving to Nashville, Tennessee, I moved about 5 months ago, right? Even think of even this podcast, like we were able to do this because, I know Drew, Drew, we're
Yeah.
able to meet, talked
And I
about it.
just met Drew.
Yeah,
I met
exactly.
Drew 3 days before I, like, pop up at this party or this house
Yeah.
party and
And
ended
so,
up, like, meeting all of you.
and
But, yeah, like, I just, that was all within hours almost, you know?
yeah, for sure. But again, it's that it happens with personal relationships, professional relationships, deals, things like that. I've had situations where I've been raising funds for oil and gas, and like someone I met here in Nashville ended up going to the same conference I was at for fundraising conference. So saw him again, and then mentioned oil and gas here and there. He ended up investing in the project, which is incredible. For the tax savings he was
Yeah.
looking for. That was a 3 interaction sort of like it was easy, it was straightforward. It was again the sense of abundance and unknown, and he just needed that help and curiosity. And so I was like, yeah, here, try this, do this, be aware of this, don't do this. Kind of education, knowledge, information, helpfulness. That again is really beneficial. And this type of mindset, heart posture, whatever. This ultimately transcends all real estate markets, right?
Mhm.
Whether it be interest rates or if the appraisal goes or appreciation, excuse me, goes up or down. Even for the appraisal when you're closing the darn thing, right? Like all these different factors really go into it. And again, it's like the idea of like when you have that seed thought and how that transpires into other thoughts. Because if you're just misaligned with again your heart for again why you're doing what you're doing and what it's going to impact all these factors, you're just going to go down a very difficult path. And we all know from buying real estate, right? But more importantly, selling real estate. If you've not sold something for real estate, right, you're essentially taking 10%, off the top. That's a very expensive lesson to learn, even if you bought the right property, right? But it may not fit with your ideal lifestyle, or it may not fit, a number of different things, or potentially you want to, pursue different endeavors. It's better to have that, conversation and intention to start, so that way you don't go down the path of being somewhere where you don't, ultimately want to be or like should be.
Yeah.
What I found.
And let's get into some of so you are in Tennessee now, but your investments, you mainly focus on Airbnbs,
Mhm.
right? In Texas. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that
Yeah.
and your Airbnb properties? You do make them stand out. You put them as like super properties.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's just a definition. So the definition of super properties essentially
Yeah.
are properties that sleep 16 plus, that have extreme
Okay.
amenities, that have like just like wow sort of factors, right? Now, granted, there's different levels of wow. Drew's properties, right? Luxury
Yeah.
desert
Like,
escapes has
uh-huh.
very different wow than my properties in hill countries. Great properties, right? And they're around the Austin area, but they're just different. So I have 2 properties with land. So one sleeps now 20, and then
Wow.
I own land next to it, and then the other sleeps now 14 and also own land next to it. One of them has a hot tub and miniature golf course, which was fun to put outside.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's just been such a blessing, unique sort of thing on it. So that's at least what I have. But yeah, I mean, happy to share any details or experiences or things I've learned with it, or lessons or anything like that.
And for the Airbnb, so you are in Texas or you're in Tennessee. So a
Mhm.
lot of our listeners or a lot of people investing out there, especially like people where I live in California, the numbers just aren't making sense. You know what I mean? So a lot of people are looking out to invest out of state. So what are some of your advice or your recommendations if people, since you are successfully basically, I'm sure you have management, but
Mhm.
you successfully have these Airbnbs in another state.
Yeah. So systems and processes are going to be
Yeah.
key. The other thing is going to be underwriting. The other thing is recognizing what the pool of labor is within that market. So if you don't
Mhm.
have, if there's not a bunch of good cleaners, SOL, right? If there's not a bunch of handy people, SOL. So keeping that in mind and understanding the type of people who live there, if it's a resort sort of town, or just what kind of the environment is, not just for the renter, but also for the labor to help support you, right?
Mhm.
There have been some times where I've just had people who are maybe not the most like reliable, and that's a challenge. And so then getting people who live 30, 40 minutes, outside to then come in is possible. And then I've just been unique on like, hey, one guy, for example, who helped build the miniature golf course, he was $300 a day, but because he was able to stay at my Airbnb, he charged $250. Amazing. Yeah, sure, man. Like stay there. There was no guest there at the time, right? So planning that. So tactically, a couple of things that come to mind, and happy to go into more detail. So one property, I have a great, service that basically automates the messaging and does the pricing for me. And that's just like a flat fee. They're not a property management company. They're, again, just kind of a service, right?
Okay.
Property management companies typically are not the best avenue to go through because, like we talked about earlier, there's the difference between their best and the best. They're typically mediocre across the board, and it's mainly because they're not incentivized to actually do what their job actually is. So how to get around that, and a different way to think about this is doing co-hosting. Now, in some ways, it's a similar model, but it's specifically different. So for my Canyon Lake property, I have a partnership with co-hosting where they manage the listing, they do the pricing, they do the messaging. If there's, big expenses or things like that, we coordinate things like that. Sounds like a typical property manager. However, the difference is simply this. I'm saying, hey, my mortgage is this, my rent or utilities, all these different factors. This is basically the expense each month. That is always paid to me regardless of what the gross revenue is. Now, when there's beyond that, initial threshold, then there's a profit split. So it's basically doing profit split as opposed to a gross revenue take. That basically allows and ensures that we're incentivized where, basically the all in, what's that property like 4,400 or something like that. Anything above that, again, we would split. Anything below that, 4,500, well, great. We would split that $100 based on our agreement.
And so that's going to make them like clean them faster, just keep them booked, kind of stay on top of it.
That's only forcing them to constantly change the listing. I've had a number of different issues with property managers. I've been through 4 different property managers of the 4-ish years I've had short-term rentals. And I've also had other property managers for long-term rentals. But again, the aspect of they're not really doing anything continuous. So you just want to keep that in mind. So any incentive that you can give to have them be continuous is, going to be key. Again, this like co-hosting type model. You can also do it yourself. And again, just have great people. My cleaner, for example, in one of my properties has honestly become my like mom's almost like good friend. And because now they communicate too, right? So it's just like, how cool is that? So it's just to say, like, if you live out of state, understand again the pool demographic of workers for where your property is, have the systems and processes, have additional options and no other options. So I also know other property management companies that are in the areas that I serve, where if I needed to quickly switch to someone, I can also get advice. I could also get feedback. I can also help them, things like that. So it's kind of creating a community around your property. And it's not something that's impossible. But the one thing that I will say is that, again, it's definitely the systems you have and the people you have. And I'll just give a quick example.
Yeah.
If you go through the entire property and you know which appliances you have and which models you have, that will help you, because if you've ever tried to buy a dishwasher remotely or a number of different appliances, it's so challenging, because then you have to pay someone to go out there to do the measurements.
Yeah. So how
and
smart.
Then you need to go, find the darn thing. Then you need to get it delivered. But then you also have the right hoses and connections and all these things, right? But that also helps in terms of, the owner's manual and things like that. So again, totally possible to do out of state. Definitely recommend some sort of co-host model, especially for short-term rentals or even midterm rentals. Long-term rentals, I haven't really seen that model. Personally, I do my long-term rentals, but I also happen to know the people who live in those houses.
Are they in Tennessee or Texas?
Texas. All my properties in Texas, at least for now. So the other thing is just to share, if you are managing your own property's long-term rental, there's this idea of creating a house manager, where basically you would either say, hey, you are the most basically responsible person, or them the most, like them the most, et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. And you have these duties, and you're the one who's going to coordinate with the handy person or this and that, right? As opposed to you texting the group and then no one gets back to you, and then like those sort of things. Like, make a designated person. Again, like we talked about earlier, elevate, delegate, right? Or delegate, then elevate. Anyways, Point is, that's super helpful. That could even be a rent reduction. Hey, your rent's normally this, but because you're helping me with this, maybe it's $50 less a month. Typically, I don't go down the path of giving discounts, but I do give incentives and benefits, right? So potentially, it's not the same thing, but just what comes to mind. Hey, happy Thanksgiving. Here's $50. Really enjoy and appreciate all you do. Hope you have a great holiday, right? Just I don't know these kind of things. When I lived in the same state and I was coming by the house, hey, I'm going to go grab food like from this place. Could I grab you anything, right? So again, relationship capital type stuff. But those are the tactical things, and also the other ways to go about managing your rentals out of state beyond just the dollars. And it's just so much easier, especially when you meet other property management companies and whatnot. You might just be able to use the same darn services and people and stuff, right? Hey, this person's really good at cutting grass. Well, amazing. Like, just have them cut my grass. So.
And when you do your long-term rentals, because you said like when you text everybody, are you renting out individual rooms?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I'm doing what's by definition called co-living. So.
Okay. Or is that the same as pad split?
It is, but I'll make
but different, right? I hear pad split more in Florida.
Sure.
Not really even over here. Like, I guess California, mostly I'm even seeing everything being built more in a rental type, like for all the rooms to be rented out type situation. Even the houses being built now, they're being built differently than what they used to. It used to be built like, the parents' room, and then you have 2 kids' rooms. And now it's like, everything's being separated and like, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. So now everything is like kind of rentable. You can put as many people in there.
Yeah. So pad split is more or less by definition. Pad split's a company, just like VRBO, right? So it's more the concept.
I did not know that. So, I thought it was kind of like a definition of like, and I've interviewed people like that. They never explained it to me, but I thought it was like a co-living thing.
Yeah. So it is. It just is. It is the company that that has it, right? Similar to those services. Co-living is the method of what you do, just like short-term rental is the method that you do for Airbnb, VRBO, things like that. The difference ultimately, typically, between a pad split type property and a just traditional co-living type property, if you will, is pad split. Traditionally, you would take, say, a living room and you'd convert it into a room. And then you would take a dining room and you'd potentially convert it into a room. And so there's a bunch of different ways to go about this, but you could transform, say, a 2,500 square foot house to like 8 bedrooms, essentially. And you have a bunch of different, shared resources, obviously, with the bathrooms and the common living places and spaces, as well as you're having designated areas of, hey, in the cupboard, here is room number 1. You have the green dishes. Room number 2 is the blue, things like that. Again, completely systematized. That way you don't have any questions, concerns, what have you. What I have essentially is
like college areas.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of sorts, kind of communal sort of thing. Yeah. What I have is just a traditional house. That house, just one of them is a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath. You got 4 people. They have a bunch of stuff. They use the house, right? So it's like a traditional long-term rental, but you're renting by the room, and then
that's how we do.
Yeah, and then you have, again, kind of a pad split sort of model. So you're in most cases, you're always able to make some sort of profit with a co-living rent by room sort of strategy. But if you are doing a long-term rental, traditionally not. And I'm saying this of like an additional third. Like I make an additional third more if I were to do, again, this like co-living sort of thing than if I were to do a traditional long-term rental. Long-term rentals also traditionally have more wear and tear because it's like one type of group that's doing it, and you just kind of deal with it. First, you have other different parties. You then have different opinions and thoughts of like what goes, how it goes. Hey, I don't want to be in your space. I want to be nice and all this other stuff. So yeah,
100%. Yeah, it's more like family style compared to like I feel like a less wear and tear.
Yeah,
like you just have a couple of individuals that might not even like be there or hang out or whatever versus like a family. It's definitely going to be a little more wear and tear, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so let's just kind of go back into a little bit. I want you to give them some advice as we wrap up here.
Yeah.
And just to bring up, you're putting out a book,
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
Investor's Guide to Joy. Okay,
You
so
bet.
where can they find that?
So that'll just be on, all my socials. I have my website, Investor's Guide to Joy, that also has
I'll have it.
resources. Awesome. Yeah, yeah. That also has resources on just like mindset. I like to, write about that stuff.
Mhm.
It also has some financial type information, how to invest in 2025, all this sort of stuff. But that'll, be on my website. I also have resources on, how to create your 3-year vision or, live your ideal day, those sort of exercises as well. And then certainly on socials, LinkedIn, Paul H. Graham, and then most other socials is It's Paul Graham. I post a lot on, YouTube of different, things I've done or things I'm doing beyond just finances. And so, happy to connect with people. But yeah, so in the final stages of kind of writing the book, and then we'll, share that, and we'll, continue to share some of these perspectives and stories for people to, build wealth and, have joy, and not have it be a, crux of sorts, like this almost false summit, essentially, that, oftentimes we achieve all the wealth and the things and the stuff, and we have, and then we realize, truth be told, we really just wanted to be more ourselves and, live our ideal lives than necessarily having all this stuff. But we went to process to have all this stuff, so we felt like we could, live our ideal life or what have you. So,
And then that's not even what we wanted.
exactly.
Yeah. And then you like put through it. Yeah. I'm definitely learning a lot of these techniques right now. You did mention like some practices. So just to kind of wrap it up, but
Yeah.
is there a practice or like a concept that was a real big game changer for you? Like that
Ooh.
you kind of made that
I guess for
shift.
what? Like what may come to mind? Because there's a bunch of different like practice
Yeah.
type stuff I do. Are you thinking like morning routine or
Maybe
like,
more just on your life. Yeah, like a concept that really shifted your mindset,
yeah,
either into faith, into, oh, maybe when you had your change of heart, when
sure.
it came to
Yeah.
investing.
So I would say the biggest thing that transformed me the most is that, and again, all these resources are on my website. There's like the ideal day. There's doing a Masogi challenge, which basically is like an annual thing that you would dedicate the year to, that drastically transforms your identity and the actions you take, and isn't really just a New Year's resolution, because those things fall off. But it's just, again, a different sort of tempo and level. But there's also the 3-year vision. And I used to think a 3-year vision would solve all my problems, give me the clarity, all this sort of stuff. But in reality, a 3-year vision tells me a lot of the things that I want to do and a lot of things that I want to have. A eulogy, or said another way, a life well lived, is really more a reflection on, hey, like in my life, who do I want to be known for? Who do I want to be known by? What do I, want to feel in each day-to-day moment? And it changes from, oh, I want to, again, buy a bunch of real estate. And it's like, can you help me buy real estate? No? Okay, see you later. And it transforms to like, hey, how's your day going? Oh, it's great. Like, amazing. Like, I'd really like, your backdrop right now for your podcast studio. And like, you have a plant, like I have a little plant over here. Cool. And we, have a conversation, we talk, and things like that. Right. And it's this idea that, was from my professional business fraternity, that talks about like how the world was better because he dwelt upon it. And that radically transformed my, perspective. And basically, to your point about a practice where it's just like, am I living in the sense of wanting, needing, desiring, having more, kind of this greed, ego, analytical thing, right? Or am I being more around, who I truly desire to be? Certainly, there's also a faith component in that as well for myself. But that really radically transformed my even 3-year vision, right? Because it's like, okay, well, do I really want these things at the expense of that? Again, do I want to be rude to a bunch of people just to amass some sort of wealth? And just to conclude, that's ultimately how the Investor's Guide to Joy came to be. I was, building a bunch of, software companies, and, even went into corporate. I doubled my W-2 income in the span of 4 years, and I septupled my net worth in the span of 18 months. And I just felt very lost, alone. It was just like, people are going to care about me. And turns out nothing really changed, right? If anything,
Yeah.
people didn't care as much because I was just turning into that analytical, egotistical type of individual. So definitely reading the book, Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday was a fascinating piece. Certainly my own faith, the idea of surrendering, being open to the unknown, realizing the most magical, wonderful experiences, come unexpectedly, and also just doing the work, right? Again, that's how things happen, is by taking action, and that then, allows things to kind of be. So, yeah.
Amazing. Well, I know that everyone's going to want to check out that book. I'm going to have it below. Is this not out yet, right?
This is not out. I'm leaving for Dubai in 2 weeks, and my hope is that I would finish writing it after I come back in kind of like a month, and really just to say fall, 2025 is when I'm planning on releasing it.
Okay, awesome.
But I've also realized that, again, I want to write the best book, not just write a book.
Yeah, so
And
no time
so
frame.
exactly. So fall
When it's
2025
ready.
is kind of the thought. But we'll certainly see
But
how
it
things.
already feels like it's almost fall. So it's like
I mean,
we're
I've
already in April. So it's like, yeah.
yeah.
But thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Paul H. Graham, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. I will have everything for him posted below. Feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe. Thanks. Bye.